Eli Turner wiped the sweat from his brow as he pushed the mop across the gleaming floor of the research facility. It was late, later than usual, and the hum of fluorescent lights mixed with the faint echo of his own footsteps. Most people thought being a janitor was a simple, unimportant job. Eli knew better. Every corner he cleaned, every machine he polished, every hallway he scrubbed, he saw things others ignored. That had always been his secret, noticing what no one else did. Tonight, though, even he felt the unusual tension in the air. The facility had been preparing for something big, though no one outside the labs knew exactly what. Scientists rushed past him with papers and laptops, their eyes wide, murmuring to one another in a low buzz of excitement and fear. Eli just shook his head, smiling faintly. He didn't need to understand their experiments to do his job. He just needed to keep the floors clean, the machines dust-free, and the corridors safe for everyone. As he rounded a corner near the observation deck, a sudden alarm pierced the air. The lights flickered once, then went steady again, but the alarm continued, a strange, uneven wail that seemed almost alive. Eli paused, mop in hand, and listened. Something was coming. He stepped outside, blinking against the harsh lights of the parking lot. Above him, the sky was no longer filled with familiar stars. A shadow moved across the city, massive and impossibly fast. Eli's heart thudded in his chest as he saw it. A colossal alien craft, its surface smooth and reflective, hovering silently above the city. It blocked the moonlight entirely, casting long, dark shadows on the streets below. People screamed and ran in all directions. Cars skidded to a stop, horns blaring in confusion. Security personnel shouted into radios, but even their voices were swallowed by the sheer presence of the ship. Eli stood frozen, not out of fear but out of focus. He noticed the details, the way the craft didn't make a sound, the soft glimmer of its surface like liquid metal, and the way small lights blinked in patterns he couldn't immediately understand. Then he saw them. The aliens. They stepped out of the craft with movement so precise and fluid it looked almost like dance. Their bodies were tall and thin, with multiple limbs moving independently, each gesture deliberate. Their skin shimmered like polished stone, reflecting the city lights in strange colors. They didn't speak in words, at least not words humans could hear, but emitted a series of tones, clicks, and musical vibrations. Eli felt an instinctive pull to understand, to connect, even though he had no training in languages or alien behavior. The scientists inside the facility panicked. Computers and AI translation systems tried to decipher the sounds, flashing screens filled with impossible symbols and failed algorithms. Nothing worked. Every attempt to communicate ended in static frustration or silence. Everyone looked helpless except Eli. He moved forward slowly, brushing past security, drawing their confused protests with a calm shrug. The aliens' gaze shifted to him, and for reasons he couldn't explain, they did not seem hostile. Instead, they paused, observing him carefully. Eli felt his pulse quicken. Somehow their attention was on him, not the scientists, not the authorities, but him. A janitor. He remembered something his father had told him years ago. Eli, people might ignore you, but if you pay attention, the world will still talk to you. He took a deep breath and let his instincts guide him. When one of the aliens made a series of clicking tones while waving its limbs, Eli responded by mimicking the gestures, moving slowly at first, testing the waters. The alien repeated its sequence, slightly altered, and Eli copied it again. It was a strange dance of observation, imitation, and careful trial. Seconds stretched into minutes. Around them, chaos raged, the sirens, the shouting, the panic, but Eli tuned it out. He focused only on the rhythm of the alien movements. Then something remarkable happened. The alien paused and emitted a single clear tone. Eli realized it was different from the chaotic clicks and pulses that had come before. It was almost expectant. A question. Eli frowned, trying to find a response that made sense. He gestured toward himself, pointing at his chest, then at the alien, then made a sweeping motion that suggested, friend. The alien's multiple limbs froze for a heartbeat, then twitched slightly. Another tone, another gesture. It was the first real acknowledgement. Eli had made contact. Inside, the scientists were watching from a safe distance, their faces pale. No one could believe what was happening. A janitor, someone who cleaned floors and fixed leaking sinks, was suddenly the most important human on Earth. Eli felt the weight of that responsibility, But he also felt a strange calm. He had faced messy corridors, broken pipes, and endless challenges alone for years. Somehow this was just another problem to solve. For hours, Eli worked with the aliens. He copied their gestures and they copied his. He started to recognize patterns, certain clicks paired with specific movements, certain tones followed by repeated sequences. He noticed subtle repetitions that no computer could detect. He began to assign simple meanings. A forward motion could mean go. A circular wave could mean look. A high-pitched tone could mean danger. It was crude, but it was enough to establish the beginning of understanding. Meanwhile, his mind kept drifting back to Mia, his daughter. She was only 8 with bright eyes and endless curiosity. He had promised her he would always protect her, teach her, and be there for her no matter what. She had no idea her father was now humanity's first real point of contact with an alien species. The thought made him smile despite the tension. Hours passed, but Eli hardly noticed. He was fully immersed in decoding the rhythm of the aliens' language. He realized something that no one else had. Communication wasn't just about translating words. It was about understanding intent, feeling, and observation. The aliens were not machines. They were intelligent, emotional, and patient creatures. And Eli had learned to notice things, to pay attention in a way that no algorithm ever could. At one point, one of the aliens emitted a long, complex series of tones and gestures. The scientist leaned forward, hoping for a breakthrough, but computers failed to interpret it. Eli, however, tilted his head, mimicked the gestures, and added a motion he had used earlier to indicate friendship or trust. The alien paused, then repeated Eli's motion almost exactly. A tiny sound escaped its throat, a vibration that felt like laughter. Eli laughed too, amazed at the breakthrough. It was a small moment but monumental. A bridge had been built, fragile but real. As the night wore on, Eli began to feel the strain. His body ached, his eyes burned, but he kept going. Every new tone or movement from the aliens was a puzzle, and Eli was determined to solve it. He noticed differences in pitch, duration, and movement sequences. He started using simple tools, a whiteboard, markers, colored chalk on the floor to map out patterns. Slowly, patterns emerged. A set of 3 clicks followed by an upward sweep always meant look up. A curved gesture meant safe. It was like solving a giant, living puzzle one piece at a time. By dawn, Eli had established basic communication. He could understand simple requests from the aliens, and they could understand some of his gestures in return. He had not only survived the night, but had become indispensable. The scientists were awestruck, some taking notes frantically, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Governments contacted the facility, desperate for updates, and Eli found himself thrust into a position he had never imagined. He was still a janitor, still a single father who worried about dinner and homework, but now he was also the key to humanity's first real contact with another civilization. Eli didn't know what the aliens truly wanted yet, and he didn't know if they were peaceful or dangerous. But one thing was clear. Patience, observation, and empathy mattered more than degrees, titles, or technology. He had learned to notice what others overlooked, and that skill had made him the most important person in the world tonight. As he finally stepped outside to catch his breath, the city bathed in the soft glow of early morning. He felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not just for himself or for Mia, but for humanity. Perhaps humans were not so small, not so weak after all. Perhaps there was a strength in everyday people, in those who faced life's ordinary challenges with courage and care, that could one day amaze even the most advanced civilizations in the universe. Eli looked up at the alien craft, its surface now reflecting the pale sunlight, and smiled. Tomorrow the real work would begin. But for tonight he had done something incredible. He had shown that understanding, patience, and humanity itself could create a bridge across the stars. And in the quiet of that early morning, with the city slowly waking and his mop leaning against the wall, Eli Turner, janitor and single father, felt the first stirrings of a journey that would change the world forever. The next morning, Eli woke before sunrise, exhaustion heavy in his bones, yet his mind was already racing. He couldn't stop thinking about the aliens. Their gestures, the strange tones, the way they moved. It was like learning a living puzzle. After a quick breakfast, he kissed Mia on the forehead and promised her he would be home before dinner. She smiled sleepily, proud but unaware of the extraordinary role her father had taken on overnight. Back at the facility, Scientists were still scrambling. They had computers, artificial intelligence, and experts in every language on Earth. Yet none of it could match what Eli had accomplished through simple observation and patience. They stared at him with a mixture of awe, disbelief, and envy as he prepared to re-enter the observation area. Eli didn't mind their skepticism. Titles, degrees, and technology mattered far less than focus, patience, and courage. The aliens waited, their limbs folding and unfolding in patterns that were almost hypnotic. Eli noticed that one of them, taller than the others, observed him more closely than anyone else. Its gestures were slower, more deliberate, and Eli felt a strange connection, as if it were testing him, evaluating his mind and intentions. Eli began by reviewing what he had learned the night before. He used the whiteboard to map gestures to meanings, marking each sound, each movement, and each sequence. Then he tried new combinations, testing whether they could understand more complex ideas: safe, friend, help, and share. Each time the aliens responded with subtle variations. Some repeated his gestures exactly, while others added their own slight modifications. Eli realized that these variations were their way of teaching him, just as he was teaching them. Hours turned into a day. Eli barely ate, barely rested, but he was exhilarated. This was a learning process unlike anything humanity had faced. It was not enough to translate. He had to interpret intent, emotion, and context. The aliens were advanced far beyond human technology, but Eli noticed something remarkable. They had no experience with patience. Their world moved at a rhythm of precision, data, and calculation. Humans, in contrast, were unpredictable. Emotions, empathy, and creativity, qualities often dismissed by machines, were what allowed him to connect with them. Eli started bringing simple objects into the observation area: a cup of water, a flower, a small toy. He showed the aliens how humans use these things, explaining through gestures and tone. The aliens observed with fascination, their tones vibrating in patterns that were almost musical. Eli realized they were curious not just about communication but about humanity itself. They wanted to understand how humans lived, felt, and thought. By evening, he had developed rudimentary sentences. He could ask them basic questions: do you need help? Or are you safe? And they could communicate small pieces of information in return. One alien pointed toward a console filled with blinking lights, then made a sweeping gesture. Eli studied it, guessing that they wanted to show him something. As he touched the console, data streamed across the screens. Images, symbols, even video of their home planet. The scientists gasped, but Eli kept calm. He realized something extraordinary. These aliens weren't just intelligent, they were deliberate, careful, and observant. They noticed details humans often overlooked. They studied patterns, rhythms, and relationships in the environment. And now, through Eli, they were beginning to understand humans. The thought filled him with awe. Humanity was not as primitive as they might have assumed. Over the next several days, Eli worked tirelessly. He created a system using hand gestures, tones, and simple visual symbols that allowed more precise communication. Each breakthrough was small, but cumulatively, they were building something significant: mutual understanding. The aliens began to respond with increasingly complex gestures. They seemed to grasp the concept of emotion, of choice, of moral decision-making. One day, Eli brought Mia to the facility. He had promised her a quick visit, and she was thrilled to see the massive observation deck. When the aliens saw her, they paused. Eli noticed subtle changes in their gestures, a softening of the sharp angles in their movements. Mia, sensing their curiosity, smiled and waved. She handed them a small stuffed toy she had brought. The aliens examined it with fascination, their tones vibrating in a way that Eli interpreted as excitement or appreciation. Eli realized that family, love, and care were concepts they had observed but never truly understood. They had studied humans from afar, analyzed data, and watched behaviors, but the depth of emotion was new to them. Through him and Mia, they were beginning to see humanity in a way that was impossible to quantify. The scientists were amazed. They had spent decades studying linguistics, alien life, and communication, yet it was a janitor and his daughter who had become the bridge. Eli didn't brag. He simply observed, tested, and communicated. His humility, patience, and dedication were his true strengths. Then came the moment of real challenge. The aliens produced a complex sequence of gestures, moving their limbs in ways that were intricate and precise, accompanied by rapid tones that sounded almost like a song. Eli studied the sequence carefully. It was clear they were asking something important, something beyond basic needs. He mapped it on the whiteboard, breaking it down into segments, trying to find patterns he could interpret. After several hours, he realized it was a question. They wanted to know if humans could collaborate on problem-solving at a moral and emotional level, not just technical. Could humans make choices based on empathy and ethics rather than pure logic? Eli felt a chill run down his spine. This was more than a test of language, it was a test of humanity itself. If humans failed, the aliens might decide that Earth was not ready for deeper contact. If humans succeeded, it could open a new era of cooperation, knowledge, and understanding. He spent the night working with the aliens, devising scenarios and solutions that required negotiation, fairness, and trust. He showed them examples of humans helping one another, protecting the weak and making sacrifices for the greater good. The aliens observed, responded with curiosity, and began to mimic these actions and their gestures. It was a strange, beautiful dance of mutual teaching. Eli realized the depth of the responsibility on his shoulders. He was no longer just a janitor cleaning floors. He was the interpreter of humanity's values, the person showing aliens what humans were truly capable of. He thought of Mia, of the lessons he had taught her about honesty, kindness, and courage. He understood that his everyday life, his choices, his empathy, his dedication, was now a living example for a species far beyond human understanding. Over the following weeks, Eli's communication skills grew exponentially. He could now ask questions, give instructions, and understand detailed responses. The aliens shared glimpses of their knowledge, mathematics far beyond human comprehension, energy sources humans had only imagined, histories of civilizations older than Earth itself. Eli translated what he could into concepts humans could grasp. The scientists marveled at how he could simplify ideas without losing their meaning. One evening, as he worked late, Eli noticed something unexpected. The aliens were observing him closely with an intensity he had not seen before. Then one of them made a gesture that seemed almost like respect, bowing slightly before him. Eli paused, feeling a mixture of pride and humility. They were recognizing his efforts, his insight, and perhaps the very essence of human resilience and ingenuity. He realized then that this was what HFY, Humans Forever Yes, was all about. It wasn't just about technology, strength, or speed. It was about creativity, patience, empathy, and the ability to find solutions in unexpected ways. Humanity had flaws, certainly, but it also had qualities that no alien civilization, no matter how advanced, could replicate easily. The turning point came when the aliens presented a real challenge. They produced a complex device that emitted energy in unpredictable ways. They gestured for Eli to manipulate it, to make choices that would balance risk and reward. If mishandled, it could be dangerous. If handled correctly, it could demonstrate humans' capacity for careful, ethical decision-making. Eli approached the device cautiously, applying everything he had learned about observation, pattern recognition, and understanding intent. He worked methodically, using gestures to communicate with the aliens and seeking subtle feedback. Step by step, he adjusted, learned, and refined his approach. The aliens responded in kind, offering hints, observing reactions, and guiding him without words. Finally, after tense moments that felt like hours, the device stabilized. A soft glow spread across its surface, and the aliens emitted tones that Eli interpreted as approval. He exhaled, relief washing over him. The test had succeeded. Through patience, observation, and empathy, humanity had passed a trial that no machine, no algorithm, and no textbook could have solved. The scientists were in awe. They had witnessed something extraordinary. A human, using nothing but intellect, intuition, and heart, had bridged the gap between species. Eli had not only mastered communication, but had demonstrated that humanity's unique strengths, creativity, empathy. As he left the observation deck that night, Eli felt exhausted, but fulfilled. He knew there was more work ahead, more lessons to teach and learn. But he also knew that he had shown the aliens something profound, that humans were more than their technology, more than their limitations. Days had turned into weeks since Eli first made contact with the aliens, and each day brought new lessons, challenges, and discoveries. What had started as simple gestures and tones had grown into a real dialogue. Eli could now understand complex ideas, and the aliens, in turn, seemed eager to learn from him. He had become not only a translator but a teacher, a bridge between two civilizations that had never imagined they could meet. The facility buzzed with activity. Scientists, engineers, and government officials crowded the observation decks, yet none dared approach the aliens directly. They watched, taking notes, running simulations, and recording patterns, but they relied on Eli to interpret subtle gestures and tones that no machine could decode. Some tried to downplay it, insisting that computers could eventually catch up, but even they could not deny the growing trust between Eli and the extraterrestrial visitors. Eli worked tirelessly, balancing his shifts as a janitor with the extraordinary responsibility he had taken on. Every time he cleaned a hallway or fixed a broken light, he carried with him the weight of humanity's reputation. Every decision mattered. He could not afford mistakes. Yet in all of this he remained calm, grounded, and humble, relying on observation, intuition, and empathy. One morning, the aliens presented him with something extraordinary. They gestured toward a large map-like hologram, hovering above a console. Lines, points, and symbols danced in the air, representing planets, star systems, and unknown civilizations. Eli studied it carefully, trying to interpret what they wanted him to understand. Slowly, he realized they were offering humanity a glimpse of the galaxy, an opportunity to connect, to learn, and perhaps to join a broader community of intelligent life. But there was a challenge. The alien signals indicated a test. They wanted to know if humanity could cooperate, reason, and act responsibly on a scale beyond Earth. Could humans make decisions guided not by greed or fear, but by understanding, fairness, and empathy? Eli understood immediately. This was no longer a test of language, it was a test of character. He called together a group of scientists and leaders in the facility. Using gestures and simple phrases, he explained the aliens' expectations. Together, they devised strategies to demonstrate humanity's capacity for cooperation. Eli emphasized one thing repeatedly. The aliens were watching more than what humans said or did. They were observing intent, thoughtfulness, and morality. The plan required patience, humility, and careful reasoning. Qualities humanity often overlooked, but Eli understood well. Over the next several days, Eli led exercises in collaboration. The aliens presented increasingly complex problems, scenarios in which resources were limited, choices affected multiple lives, and consequences were unpredictable. Humans initially struggled, debating endlessly and often disagreeing. Eli guided them patiently, teaching that compromise, empathy, and observation could lead to solutions no algorithm could generate. He demonstrated negotiation, ethical reasoning, and trust building, showing that humans could act with wisdom even under pressure. The aliens responded positively. They observed the humans adjusting strategies, listening to one another, and prioritizing fairness over selfish gain. Slowly, their gestures grew less sharp and rigid, and their tones became more melodic and rhythmic. Eli interpreted it as approval, perhaps even admiration. One afternoon, as Eli was demonstrating a complex solution, an alien approached him directly. Its multiple limbs moved in a fluid motion that Eli recognized as their version of attention or respect. It produced a tone sequence that Eli had learned to understand. It was an invitation to witness something important. The alien guided Eli to a small chamber within the ship. Inside, he saw a device unlike anything on Earth. It pulsed with energy, changing colors and emitting a low hum that resonated in his chest. Eli instinctively understood that this was a demonstration of trust. The aliens were showing him a piece of technology far beyond human capability, testing whether humans could handle knowledge without causing harm. Eli approached slowly. He studied the device, observing its patterns, its rhythms, and the subtle reactions it gave when touched. Using gestures, he communicated his intention: to learn, not to exploit; to understand, not to dominate. The aliens responded with slight adjustments of their limbs, signaling acknowledgement. Eli realized that trust, patience, and careful observation were as crucial here as language. Over the following hours, he learned to manipulate the device safely, observing every reaction, asking questions, and confirming his understanding. The aliens seemed fascinated by his caution and reasoning. They had expected curiosity, yes, but perhaps not humility. Eli had shown them that humans could approach power responsibly, with ethics and thoughtfulness. Back on Earth, the news of Eli's success began to spread quietly among key officials. Though most of the public had yet to see the aliens, the demonstration proved something extraordinary. Humanity was not reckless or primitive. It was capable of intelligence, morality, and collaboration in ways that could earn the respect of civilizations far older and more advanced. As Eli emerged from the chamber, the aliens surrounded him in a pattern he had come to recognize. Their gestures formed a rhythm, and their tones resonated like a song. Eli understood it as a form of acknowledgement and celebration. For the first time, he felt not just connection but recognition. The aliens were impressed, perhaps even amazed, by what a single human could accomplish. He returned to the observation deck, exhausted but elated. Scientists crowded around him, asking questions, analyzing patterns, and marveling at his insight. For Eli, it was not about praise. It was about the message humanity had sent. Through empathy, patience, and careful reasoning, humans could rise to challenges that seemed impossible. That evening, Eli stepped outside to watch the city lights. He thought of Mia, of how ordinary life, feeding her, teaching her, protecting her, had prepared him for extraordinary moments. The qualities he had cultivated in small everyday actions were exactly what allowed him to bridge the gap between species. He realized that the value of humanity was not in technology or strength alone, but in the capacity to care, observe, and act wisely. The aliens returned with another demonstration the following week. They created scenarios that tested more than logic. They tested morality. Situations where helping one person could risk another, where honesty could conflict with expedience, where trust and intuition were as vital as knowledge. Eli guided human teams through each scenario, demonstrating negotiation, compromise, and empathy. Slowly, the aliens' responses shifted. Their tones grew more melodic, their gestures more open. Eli understood this as respect and recognition. Then came the moment that would define everything. The aliens presented a scenario where humans were asked to make a decision that affected the future of their own planet. A series of hypothetical crises were projected: climate instability, resource shortages, and social unrest. Humans had to prioritize solutions, weighing long-term sustainability against immediate needs. Eli led the discussions, emphasizing observation, communication, and ethical reasoning. Hours passed. Human teams debated, considered consequences, and ultimately agreed on strategies that balanced fairness, efficiency, and care for all lives involved. The aliens watched silently, their gestures slow and measured, but Eli could sense approval in every movement. Finally, the lead alien, the tallest and most observant, stepped forward. Its limbs formed a complex sequence that Eli had learned to interpret as acknowledgement, and it emitted a tone that resonated deeply in his chest. Eli understood the meaning. Humanity had passed the ultimate test. The aliens were not just observing, they were impressed. They had discovered something extraordinary, that humans, though young in the galaxy, were capable of wisdom, morality, and understanding. In a moment of quiet reflection, Eli realized the truth of what had happened. Humanity was remarkable not because of weapons, technology, or dominance, but because of heart, patience, and creativity. He had shown the aliens that even ordinary humans, janitors, teachers, parents, could embody these qualities. He had demonstrated the best of what it meant to be human. The aliens' craft remained above the city, but its presence was no longer intimidating. It was a symbol of connection, curiosity, and mutual respect. Scientists and officials now understood that the path forward was collaboration, not fear. Eli had become more than a janitor or a single father. He had become a representative of humanity's potential. That night, Eli returned home to Mia. She was asleep in her bed, clutching the stuffed toy she had given to the aliens. Eli smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "We did something amazing today," he whispered. "The world is going to see that being human can be extraordinary." He sat quietly, reflecting on the journey. He had faced fear, uncertainty, and the unknown, but through observation, patience, and empathy, he had bridged a gap that no technology could have spanned alone. He realized that heroism did not always come from grand titles or training. It often came from ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Over the following days, the aliens began sharing knowledge more openly. They revealed glimpses of their science, culture, and history, trusting humanity with insights that could transform life on Earth. Governments and scientists continued to work with Eli as the primary mediator,